Hey everybody, I'm Scody, and today we're talking about the current state of Shatterpoint. Yeah, I know it's been a while, but look, it's me, I'm here, deal with it. Let's move on. So here we are about 14 months after the release of Shatterpoint, and the first thing that I want to do is get everybody on the same page. Whether you never got into the game, or you were like me, and you were all over the game at the start, and then, life happens, and you haven't touched a mini in over a year, and you got these massive goob-level bags under your eyes. Let's catch up. If you want to skip the recap, here, click this timestamp. Where? Oh, what's that behind your ear? It's the timestamp. For those of you that don't know, Star Wars Shatterpoint is a skirmish-style tabletop miniatures game. In my opinion, the games aren't too long, usually between an hour or two, and the rules are relatively simple. And since it's an objective-based game, you don't have to worry about losing in the beginning and not being able to recover. Your strike team is comprised of 2 squads, and each squad contains a primary unit, usually a named character like Anakin or Maul, a secondary unit, usually also named but minor characters like Rex or Jango, and a supporting unit, often unnamed like the 501st Clones or the droids. I won't get too much into how to play, let me know in the comments if you actually want a tutorial video, but you take turns with your opponent activating these units, and they're activated mostly randomly, creating some cool like who's it gonna be type moments, which with the right crew could be pretty fun. The best part of all of it is this tug-of-war style struggle system, which you pull in your direction by either holding objectives or defeating your opponent's units. It's really neat, really fun, but enough of the rules. Let's talk about what's released since launch. Spoiler alert, it's been a lot. Everything starts with the core box. It contains everything that 2 players need to play, and even a year after release, I still think it's the best place to start for new players. Split it with a buddy or increase your paint log exponentially with this one purchase. There's some terrain in the box, but you're gonna want more, so buy a terrain pack or get a buddy with a 3D printer. Not me, I'm taken. More on the core box later. Let's move on to what's happened in the last year or so. First, we got a ton of stuff that played nicely with the core box. Obi, clones, Asajj, more clones, Grievous and droids, more clones. But then they released the first and currently only dual pack. The dual pack featured Obi, this time as a secondary, and Vader. In my community, Vader became an immediate meta. He could buff his entire strike team, could deal out insane damage himself, and the only real limiter was his speed, which was slow and intimidating, kind of like how he's portrayed in most depictions of his character. This is where I heard the first inklings of discontent about the game. First of all, the pack with only 2 minis was very expensive, and it was due to the diorama included in the pack. Fine, whatever, but the diorama wasn't compatible with the game terrain. To be honest, mine is still in the closet, primed and unpainted, just like my dignity. Another complaint was that Vader was just too powerful, and it had officially kicked off the discussion of meta lists just 1 month after the game was released. But hey, people were still having fun. The Inquisitors pack that Vader was released alongside of kind of sucked, and you had very limited options with your support due to the resources that Vader took away from your strike team. Anyways, about 2 months after that, in September, I remember the game feeling repetitive. There was only so many synergies that were worth playing with, and even with all the packs that had been released, the main problem was the missions, or I guess the lack thereof. The mission pack that was released with the game was super simple, 9 objectives, only 3 of which were active at a time, and by late game, some of them were worth more than others, and that was decided randomly, which is still how it plays out in the game currently. Even though it was still fun, there was just a lot of deja vu. So in October, we got a new mission pack, and it felt the same still. It was essentially the same. The only major changes were the objective locations were in a slightly different area of the table, and when you drew the Shatterpoint card, which is an activation card that allows you to activate any of your units still on the table, you'd gain 1 of 3 passive abilities depending on the mission cards. This is where I began to personally drop off of the game for several reasons, but one of them was the repetitive nature of the game. But over the last 8 months or so, plenty of new packs had been released. Vader Derogatory and some Stormtroopers, Luke, Boosh, Lando, R2, Plo Koon, Ahsoka again, more clones, Leia, Ewoks, some more Ewoks, the Bad Batch peeps, Hondo, Moff Gideon and his Dark Troopers, Mando and his pals, Iden Versio. Iden version? I'm just gonna say Iden. Iden, Han, Chewie, the Rebels peeps, both the good and the bad guys, the guy that's too short to be a Stormtrooper. And also about 2 months ago, a new mission pack. And does it feel any different? More than the last mission pack, sure, but the mission pack changes the objective layout again. But the big change with this latest mission pack is the challenging the odds feature, which calls out a certain type of unit, either secondary or supporting, and if you wound an enemy unit with that type of unit, and you have an extra force laying around, you can move the struggle token 1 space, or in other words, you score an objective point. So, that brings us to current day. Before we get into what I think, let's pretend we care about what other people think. There's often complaints about balancing, like how Padme and her fans can stand against the force-wielding Sith, or how Ewoks go toe-to-furry-toe with military-trained fighters. I mean, on one hand, that's a fair thing to point out, but on the other hand, Did you see those Ewoks? But for real, the combat trees, at least to me, have always felt thematic. Anakin is focused more on dealing tons of damage, whereas Ahsoka is a bit more elusive and controls her movement better. In the same vein, Padme and her crew are focused on support and positioning, and are inherently pretty good at avoiding damage. It's just the nature of a heroes versus villains type game like Shatterpoint or Marvel Crisis Protocol. And another complaint that kind of ties into this one are that the characters typically never die. They can die, it just takes a lot of focused effort or a reckless opponent, and there's usually not too much of a payoff for removing a character from the board entirely. It's not a huge deal to me, but if you want a game where you could wipe your opponent off the board, run Vader and Maul. But seriously, this game is not for people that want to destroy their opponents in combat. It's an objective-based game, and so the last complaint that I wanted to talk about, and perhaps the most valid, regards the game's staying power. So nobody wants to get into a game that's going to die in a few months. I personally don't think Shatterpoint is going that way, but it's a concern that people bring up, so I wanted to address it. More on that in a bit. Let's move on to the positive things about Shatterpoint. And most of what I do hear about the game is positive, except you in the YouTube comments. I see you typing. You typing something spiteful. Just send it. Do it. People say that it's a good scale for painting and collecting, the struggle system is fun, and it's a good balance of easy to learn, difficult to master. And I'm inclined to agree. Honestly, I'm still a fan of this game, and I'm always down to whip out the minis and hop on Tabletop Simulator or play a quick game, because it's just that. It's a quick game. I don't need to get invested, but I can if I want to, and my minis don't get blown off the table when I make one wrong decision. Shatterpoint is like your favorite light beer. Not the best, most in-depth drink of choice, but you could have many fun nights with it, and sometimes you're not ready for the hard stuff. So, what does the future of Shatterpoint look like if I don't think it's going away anytime soon? First of all, there's about 7 packs planned to come out in the next 5 or so months, and that leaves plenty to experiment with as we learn more about the characters and their abilities, and as people play them, there will be more creative synergies and strategies to come. Secondly, I hear a lot of people either getting back into the game or their group has kept going strong throughout the summer, and people are genuinely enjoying it. Which brings me to my last point. I don't think that this game will ever be a Warhammer, but I do think that there's a place for it in competitive play. It's not my cup of tea, competitive play, but there's something about the relative randomness of the unit activation and the priority objective location that rewards creative players. Unlike Star Wars Legion, where you can go in with a playbook, phases 1 through 3, and you stick to the plan the entire game, Shatterpoint forces you to make more on-the-fly decisions, but since it's a small skirmish, it doesn't get bogged down by too many options or convoluted rules. So with all that said, is Shatterpoint for you? If you were into the game before and hoping for it to drastically change with new mission packs or a campaign mode, no, I don't think that you'll be impressed by the changes. But if you were into the game and got distracted by life, or you never got into the game but are looking for a fun new hobby, I'd say go for it, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. Nerd. Grab a buddy, get the core pack, it's still relevant, a very cost-effective buy, and just have fun. The models are awesome, the painting is fun and not too painful, the rules are light but not too simple, and the mechanics make it a fun experience. And since it's been out a while, there's a whole lot of cool third-party tokens and accessories that just make it fun to deck out your getup. Don't want to take my word for it? Go trial the game somewhere, or if you have Tabletop Simulator, go play a game or two and see if it's for you. Don't expect Warhammer, don't expect Star Wars Legion, or even Marvel Crisis Protocol. This game is its own feeling. And if you're still not convinced, leave it in the comments. What would make the game better? Personally, I'm hoping for either a co-op or a player versus player campaign mode with some specific rules on the teams that you could bring. I think that would just breathe some life into the game. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like, hit the subscribe. I'm planning on making videos again more regularly, and I'd like to feature some packs in like 5 minutes or less, that sort of thing. Last thing, go check out Lunchbox Pod. It's a podcast that I'm 50% of, and we got big plans. There's a snack pack waiting for you. Anyways, that's all for now. See you guys in the next one.